This is a story about one nation conquering another. It didn't take years of wars and great losses. It unfolded with surprising speed, like a ripe fruit falling from a branch. Here's how it happened. In the fall of 1532, a squad of brave Incas landed on the Spanish shore near Cadiz. Their weapons and animals were unknown to the locals. So at first they didn't take the newcomers seriously. But when the Incas captured the first cities, Charles V, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, the most powerful ruler in Europe, came out to meet them. However, his 80,000-strong army couldn't defeat the Incas. They forced the Spanish to flee and even took Charles himself prisoner. The Incas, remarkably, had only 168 soldiers. The consequences are well known. Over the next decades, the Incas conquered all of Europe. A staggering 90% of locals died from violence and terrible diseases. The Incas completely destroyed local languages and religion. Only rumors of this once vibrant culture remained. Well, all by the will of the sun god. You're probably asking yourself, what kind of fantasy is this? Everything was the other way around. That is precisely why today we will explore why it happened the way it did. We'll do this by exploring Jared Diamond's book, Guns, Germs, and Steel. Let's explore his theories. Why is our world dominated by the people of Eurasia and their descendants rather than Incas, Africans, or Australians? You'll learn whether we really are what we eat. You'll also discover why Native Americans didn't domesticate apple trees and what disadvantages zebras have. Finally, with no extremes, we'll look at the problems with guns, germs, and steel itself has. Let's start with the most important fact about this book. Its author, Jared Diamond, is not a professional historian. His main scientific work was in natural sciences. This included various fields of biology. Later, he focused on geography and ecology. He only turned to history after the age of 50. This fact explains the key strength of Guns, Germs, and Steel. It also explains its weaknesses, as we'll see later. We'll discuss which of these outweighs the other closer to the end. Diamond became interested in human history in New Guinea. His passion for ornithology took him there. He writes in the book about a local activist. This activist asked him why whites created cargo, various goods and technology, and not the locals.
Yali's question really threw me. It seemed so simple and obvious, and I thought it must have a simple and obvious answer. But when he asked me, I had no idea what that answer was.
The search for this fundamental reason behind global differences led Diamond to create this book. This book attempts to provide a short history of everybody for the last 13,000 years. The question motivating the book is, why did history unfold differently on different continents? Most researchers cite capitalism, science, technology, and the desire to conquest. True, but why did these arise in some societies and not others? Could the difference be solely cultural? For instance, did Western Judeo-Christian culture foster these developments, unlike traditional Chinese or Aztec cultures? Possibly, but what shaped these different cultures? Could the reason be inherent differences between peoples and races? Perhaps some are naturally more intelligent and thus designed to dominate? A tempting single answer to a complex issue. However, Diamond says there is currently no convincing evidence supporting genetic differences between people, and often representatives of underdeveloped peoples surpass Europeans in intelligence. The answer lies deeper. Diamond argues that the initial difference, the ecological and geographical conditions of Earth's continents, triggered unequal development. But how? The core idea of guns, germs, and steel can be summarized by the saying, "We are what we eat." We all need food to live. Finding proper nourishment remains perhaps one of the main problems even now. For most of their history, Homo sapiens obtained food by gathering and hunting, typically a nomadic lifestyle in a small, similar bands worldwide. Initially, humanity had equal starting conditions. Even with local advantages in animals or berries, significant food reserves were impossible. But around 11,000 BCE, a fundamental shift occurred. People globally began food production, domesticating plants and animals. Diamond lists 5 regions where this definitely happened without external influence. The Fertile Crescent in the Middle East, China, Mesoamerica, the Andes, the eastern part of modern-day United States. There are also several regions where it's unknown whether people independently came to food cultivation. In the future, people either borrowed food production techniques or were conquered. Today, only isolated tribes continue to be gatherers and hunters. Why did farmers and herders gain such an advantage? Despite common belief, ancient farmers' lives weren't much better than hunters. More work, less diverse food. Individually, a hunter-gatherer might win, but at the community level, fundamental changes occurred. This was because food production allowed for more food, much more food. First and foremost, this increased population density. A hectare of wheat could feed more people than a hectare of wild grasses. 10 farmers would certainly overpower one hunter. But the sedentary lifestyle of farmers and herders had another advantages as well. First, permanent housing allowed more children, limited by food, not the burden of carrying them. A boost for birth rates. Second, surplus food enabled specialization. Blacksmiths, priests, leaders, and later scribes, soldiers, merchants. Third, domesticated animals and plants offered benefits beyond food. Wool, flax, transportation, and advantages in warfare. Indeed, path to the heart of civilization lies through the stomach. But if food production provides such powerful bonuses, why didn't it emerge everywhere and to the same extent? The answer lies in ecological conditions, initially available species of plants and animals. Among wild plants and animal species, only a small minority are edible to humans or worth hunting or gathering. Most species are useless to us as food for one or more of the reasons. Let's start with plants. Though we eat hundreds of plant species now, our basic nutrition lies on crops domesticated at agriculture's dawn. Key examples are cereals: wheat, corn, rice, barley, and sorghum. Then some legumes: beans, peas, lentils, chickpeas. We also have root vegetables: potatoes, yams, sweet potatoes. Crucially, these species were edible in their wild state. Ancient Middle Eastern gatherers ate wild wheat and barley, almost identical to domesticated versions. A small step, cultivation, was all that was needed. This small step took millennia, requiring sickles and crop storage knowledge. Later, understanding cultivation, these early farmers domesticated less cooperative species: dates, olives, and melons. A similar story repeated itself in other centers of food production. The key is having naturally beneficial wild plants nearby, which then allows improvements of more complex ones, like wild strawberries domesticated into garden strawberries in the Middle Ages. But why did food production appear so early in the Fertile Crescent and so late in America? Diamond suggests several factors influenced its speed. First, wild food reduction. Some regions saw a faster disappearance of hunted animals. Second, climate change, like increased wild cereals spread in the Middle East. Third, natural characteristics. Corn, for instance, took longer to domesticate. It's not very appealing wild. Where these factors didn't align, people didn't domesticate readily available crops. They might have simply lacked enough good plants options. Thus, the reason Native Americans did not domesticate apples lay with the entire suite of wild plants and animal species available to Native Americans. That suite's modest potential for domestication was responsible for the late start of food production in North America. The situation with animals was even more unequal. Counting only large domesticated mammals, only 14 species were domesticated by the 20th century. Just 5 are widespread globally: sheep, goat, cow, pig, horse, all from Eurasia and North Africa. Humans also domesticated smaller mammals, birds, and even insects. But Diamond argues large domesticated mammals were vital for civilization's development: transportation, fertilizer, milk, and more. In the New World, the only large domesticated mammals were llamas and alpacas, confined to that region. Partly because of this, Mesoamerican meat sources were turkeys and dogs. Just look at those yummy curves. Meanwhile, Africa and Australia had no ancient domestication success. This was due to the local people's limitations. Simply, candidates for human cohabitation needed certain traits: herbivorous or omnivorous diet. Keeping meat-only animals is impractical, unless we're talking about cats, which hunts pests and delight us. Rapid growth. Raising slow-growing elephants and primates isn't economically viable. Captive reproduction. This foiled cheetah's domestication attempted by ancient Egyptians. These felines have complex mating rituals, unsuitable for captivity. Mildest temperament possible. Not biting like zebras. Not a constant threat like bears or hippos. Low panic response. Many wild animals are too prone to fleeing, making captivity unsuitable. Social animals. Exceptions are mildly psychopathic cats and ferrets. Others, dogs to cows, live in packs or herds, easing human dominance. These criteria eliminated most animals unevenly, and Eurasia initially had many candidates. Moreover, favorable geography, no major barriers, and an east-west orientation helped cultivated plants and domesticated animals spread faster across Eurasia. Meanwhile, llamas or alpacas couldn't reach mountainous Mexico due to impassable jungles and deserts. Thus, Eurasia's geographical and ecological features facilitated the first and richest center of food productions, while other regions had fewer species or couldn't independently produce food. In turn, food production boosted population growth. But animals husbandry had another consequence. Tiny but vital. Close human-animal coexistence led to diseases. Most deadly human infections, smallpox, influenza, tuberculosis, plague, measles, cholera, came from domesticated animals. Domestic farming keeps many animals in small areas. This causes their bacteria and viruses to mutate faster. Close, constant human contact transmits them to new hosts. Since this infection hasn't adapted to the new carrier, it typically becomes more deadly. Diamond details infection transmission and combat. But after COVID-19, we are all too familiar. So let's move straight to the main question. Why did Eurasian diseases devastate the New World, not the other way around? First, some did spread. Syphilis, untreatable until 20th century, likely originated in the Americas. Second, quantity mattered. Since more species were domesticated in Eurasia, they accumulated more diseases. And following developed trade routes, infections quickly left their homes. And third, the New World's main domesticated animals, turkeys, llamas, weren't kept in dense pens. This reduced the chance of deadly new diseases emerging. But even without these, Eurasians had an advantage: faster civilization development. But how and why this development was unequal? After tens of thousands of years of slow progress, humanity leaped forward in just a few millennia. Civilizations, developed community groups, led this process. Diamond says they mastered three key things: writing, technology, and politics. He dedicates chapters to how food production shaped their development and strengthened them. Do you know what else leads to progress? Knowledge without falling to the extremes. So if you want to support rational voices, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Writing emerged for record-keeping, laws, and other interesting things as early as examples show. Eventually, texts carried myths and state propaganda. Diamond lists three independent writing centers: Mesoamerica, the Fertile Crescent, and China. Possibly, Egyptians also developed it independently. All other writing systems devised anywhere in the world at any time appear to have been descendants of systems modified from or at least inspired by Sumerian or early Mesoamerican writing. Writing's main advantage is reliable information transfer and storage. These speed up civilized community development, especially technology spread. This contributed to the faster development of civilized communities, in particular thanks to the spread of technologies. Diamond links technological development to sedentary lifestyles and food production, enabling specialization. He also offers his invention theory. The saying "necessity is the mother of invention" is often misleading. This idea comes from targeted projects like nuclear weapons. Actually, inventions often resemble cars, initially not seen as essential. Why use a bulky, slow thing when horses exist? Once a device had been invented, the inventor then had to find an application for it. Only after it had been in use for a considerable time did consumers come to feel that they needed it. Need means economic benefits. Aztecs and Maya didn't use wheel transport not because they lacked the wheel, they used it in toys, but because they lacked suitable animals. Inventions must also align with local values and group interests. For example, firearms almost vanished from Japan after civil wars due to conflict with samurai ideals. And we all use QWERTY layout because it was effective on Remington typewriters and simply became habitual. Political development is civilization's third key achievement. Diamond identifies four basic societal forms. The simplest is the band, a few dozen mostly related people with no hierarchy. Next are tribes of a few hundred, the limit of personal acquaintance, also without hierarchy but led by temporary big men. Large tribes with ambitious big men becomes chiefdoms, up to tens of thousands of people. They are led by a hereditary chief with a high-status support group of bureaucrats and nobility. Finally, there are states with potentially unlimited population, developed hierarchy, power division, and status. States feature cities with public buildings, temples, palaces. The leader's power becomes absolute, supported by religion and ideology. States can effectively wage wars, absorb population, and accumulate resources and technologies, especially using writing. As a result, descendants of those societies that achieved centralized government and organized religion earliest ended up dominating the modern world. What turns scattered bands into powerful states? Food production and its consequences. Larger population need more complex management. And in competition, the most capable communities won. So why did Pizarro win? Returning to the initial question, why did a few Spaniards led by Pizarro defeat the Incas, not vice versa? The immediate causes were firearms and steel weapons. Indigenous Americans had neither, as well as better access to information thanks to an effective writing system. Deadly diseases finished the job. In turn, the expedition itself became possible thanks to technology, ships, and politics. The Spanish monarchy, which encouraged the conquest on the other side of the earth. Spaniards surpassed Incas because Eurasian food production began earlier with more plants and animals option. Furthermore, Eurasia's geography aided the spread of species, knowledge, and population. Therefore, Diamond argues Eurasia's dominance wasn't due to superior people, but superior initial ecological and geographical conditions for developed communities. Now for the critique of guns, germs, and steel. Like any ambitious work covering everything, it faces questions. Such books gain popularity by making complex topics accessible, seemingly revealing hidden truths. General topic books struggle with originality. Even with a strong central idea, authors must explain basic concepts. We won't judge Diamond's novelty or presentation ease. That's for each reader to decide. Serious criticism is another matter. Similar books often provoke much debate, some justified, some perhaps from jealousy. Why did this amateur win a Pulitzer when others struggle for grants? Either way, we've compiled a list of issues with guns, germs, and steel. Diamond contradicts himself. The main thesis, history follow different courses for different peoples because of difference among people's environment, not because of biological differences among people themselves. However, closer to the end, he himself acknowledges that cultural characteristics can arise randomly and independently of the environment. He also mentioned the influence of chance and the role of individuals. This leads to the second problem. Guns, germs, and steel poorly explains development difference within continents. We grasp Eurasia's advantage over America. But why did Europe surge ahead, not China? Diamond explains initial inequality well, but subsequent random factors weaken his environmental determinism. Problem 3 is related. Diamond oversimplifies beyond his main thesis. Food production arguments are generally sound, leveraging his biology and geography background. But on other topics, human evolution, writing, technology, politics, he makes vast generalizations and offers very underdeveloped theories. At the end of the book, Diamond provides a list of sources for each chapter, but it's unclear if he's summarizing or concluding. The book contains clear errors. For example, regarding Australia's ancient fauna extinction, he compares them to tame Galapagos and Antarctic animals, lacking human predators. However, Australian megafauna did have significant predators, like giant monitor lizards and crocodiles, which Diamond mentions. The issue isn't just potential professional inaccuracy, but reliance on assumptions without firm evidence. Problem 5. Chapter 10, Boundless Access and Sloping Horizons, argues Eurasia's east-west orientation and fewer barriers aided spread of plants, animals, culture, and knowledge. But does he offer concrete data beyond general observation? No. A January 24 study attempted to verify this. Researchers compared the relationship between temperature and moisture on one hand and the spread of cultural innovation on the other, and came to these conclusions. Ecological differences and obstacles do negatively affect cultural exchange, but the strength of this influence depends on characteristics of the culture itself. But they didn't record any significant differences in the accessibility of key regions between different continents. Their research might also be flawed, but at least is not as subjective like the much of guns, germs, and steel. We'll stop here. More criticism exists regarding potential justification of colonialism, but these are interpretive issues, not book flaws themselves. Guns, Germs, and Steel is undeniably important, impacting millions, including Bill Gates. It effectively dispels racist myths and offers an interesting explanation of environmental influence, especially the available plants and animals on human development. Diamond engaged the public with the general pattern of history, encouraging the search for fundamental causes and combining diverse fields. As a biologist and geographer, Diamond's ecological factor analysis is strongest. His arguments weaken as he moves beyond this. Many of the book's problems are typical of popular history. He likely exaggerates geography's role, just as Acemoglu and Robinson might overstate institutions in Why Nations Fail. In some ways, he resembles a Marxist materialist. Production is a base, politics and culture the superstructure. This book is good for developing a general understanding of history's uneven progression. However, like all sources, including this video, it requires skepticism, comparison with other theories, and extracting personal value even if you dislike the book. We'll continue reviewing notable books you might have missed, and we'll keep conversation going about other important topics, balancing on the tightrope and trying not to fall for the extremes. So don't forget to support our small independent team of, yes, you might have guessed from my accent, Ukrainian journalists and politologists. See you soon.